and the numbers of adoptions are moving in the wrong direction. And so it just means that the number of children that are languishing in orphanages is larger because of that.
I'm Charlie Butts.
A mixed market on Wednesday saw the Dow falling 11 1/3 points. The Nasdaq gained 25 1/4, while the S&P 500 lost 3 2/3. For American Family News, I'm Steve Jordahl.
We have been in a combat zone, and the stresses on soldiers come out quickly. It's an absolute joy to have the soldiers come back to you and say, man, you don't know how much that helped. It's a huge mission field.
Exploring Missions. Listen Saturday evening at 6:30 Central and Sunday afternoon at 1 on American Family Radio.
Darkness is not an affirmative force. It simply reoccupies the space vacated by the light.
This is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
It should be uncomfortable for a believer to live as a hypocrite.
Delivering people out of the bondage of mainstream media and the philosophies of this world.
God has called you and me to be his ambassadors, even in this dark moment. Let's not miss our moment.
And now, Abraham Hamilton III.
Welcome to the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio. Glad to have you with us. Walker Wildmon here, sitting in for Abraham Hamilton III. Abe's out today, and he'll be returning soon, hopefully. But until then, today at least, you have me, Walker Wildmon, sitting in for Abraham Hamilton III. Glad to be with you once again. AFR.net is our website. Check out our website, AFR.net. More specifically, you can visit the podcast page on our website, afr.net. Click on the podcast link, and there you'll see the Hamilton Corner, and you can listen to past shows. We keep at least a 30-day archive there of past shows you can listen to. And, of course, today's show will be posted on the podcast page at afr.net. And lastly, as far as ways to connect to the show, I always say lastly, and then I have three more things. But secondly, you can catch up with us by downloading the app on your phone. Download the AFR app on your phone or your tablet device. That's a great way to listen also. And the podcasts are also there. AFR app on your smartphone, tablet device. Lastly, and I mean that, you can watch the show on, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, but YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Those three locations, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Just type in the Hamilton Corner on those platforms, and then you'll find the show page there, and you can watch the show. Once again, good to be with you this Wednesday afternoon. A couple things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about illegal immigration, not a new topic, but we're going to delve into that. We're going to go more in depth. We're going to talk about the root cause of the crisis at our southern border. It's truly, truly a humanitarian crisis. Very, very sad situation. And on the other hand, it's a very frustrating situation that our country is having to deal with that. We'll also talk about the Democrat debates tonight. The first main Democrat debate starts tonight, 25-plus candidates. I think they're dividing it up into 2 nights, which is very wise. But, you know, Marty a minute ago, or one of our call screeners said, you know, this is like watching NASCAR. It's a race to the left. Who can go to the left faster than the other? And that's exactly what this is going to be about. You know, they're saying one's going to say free health care, you know, for X, Y, and Z, and the other one's going to say no free health care for all. Then the third one's going to say no free health care for the whole world. So you're gonna get to watch this, and I'm going to hopefully watch that tonight. It's going to be amusing. But not only is it going to be amusing, folks, but this is real life. This is not a comedy show. It's not Saturday Night Live. What we're going to watch tonight on these Democrat debates is an entire segment of our country, or some would argue half of our country, that wants to completely uproot and throw out the founding of our country, the principles that our country was founded on, arguably, that's what the left wants to do. That's what these Democrats want to do. Tear out our Constitution, tear out the Declaration of Independence, tear out all of the laws that make our country great, and let's just throw them away and let's start over new. That's basically what they want to do if you study where they stand on the issues. Before I jump into all of that, we're going to take a look at Scripture here. Leviticus. Yes, I said Leviticus. We're going to go to Leviticus chapter 19, verse 18. Here in chapter 19 of Leviticus, Moses is laying out different commandments. You jump down to verse 18, and this is God speaking through Moses. God, the Lord, commanded Moses, write these things down. Moses says, "Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge against anyone among your people, but love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord." Moses there concludes. Well, no, that's the Lord concluding. Moses, once again, writing this down. And, what we can pull from that is basically love your neighbor as yourself, meaning love your neighbor as yourself. It's self-explanatory. But what I want to point to here is, some say, and I was actually in the car years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago minimum, maybe even longer than that. But I was driving from North Mississippi to Arkansas. I was actually going duck hunting in Arkansas. Some call Arkansas the duck hunting capital of the world. Driving to Arkansas, I picked up a homeless man, or what appeared to be a homeless man, and I was going to give him a ride from somewhere on Interstate 40 in Arkansas to Memphis. I was actually headed back from Arkansas. Well, I picked up this fella. I don't even remember his name. Don't remember that much about him. I think he was coming from the West Coast, headed towards Memphis. But I picked him up, and I wouldn't advise that. I wouldn't advise. It's risky. Yeah, it's risky. I was young, not very wise. It's risky picking up a complete stranger by yourself on the side of the interstate at night. So I'm not advising this, but I did it. Everything worked out fine. And as we were talking, I was trying to witness to him, and he pulled out the Old Testament argument. Well, what about the Old Testament? What about, not being able to eat certain fish or this or that? And I was honestly completely caught off guard. I was not polished up on apologetics, on theology, and how do you mingle the Old Testament with the New, all of that. I mean, I completely got taken off guard, and it showed. I didn't have a good answer, and shame on me for not being prepared. I'm 18 years old, and I get asked this pretty complex question about, what about the Old Testament and all those bad things in the Old Testament, this or that. And this is a prime example where the Old Testament and the New Testament, they go together just perfectly. Because remember the Pharisees? Remember the Pharisees trying so hard to trip up Jesus, and they say, "Well, Jesus," I'm paraphrasing here, "well, Jesus, why don't you just go ahead and tell us, since you know it all, why don't you just go ahead and tell us what the greatest commandment is? You got to pick one commandment out of all the commandments. Tell us which one's the greatest, because you got to have one that's the greatest." And what they're trying to do is they're trying to pit Jesus against himself and against the Father by making Jesus say, okay, this one is the greatest. And Jesus eloquently responds and says, "Love the Lord your God. Love the Lord with your God with all of your heart, mind, and soul. Love your neighbor as yourself." That's the greatest command. And that's exactly what the Lord said in Leviticus. So that's what we can take from that. Love your neighbor as yourself. I want to jump in the last 6 or 7 minutes of this segment into the topic of illegal immigration. And here's what we have going on, because, we all know there's a crisis. Even now the media is coming out and saying this is a crisis. And we've been saying that for years. But I want to go over the basics of what is going on at the southern border and what the root problem is, because we get all caught up in the rhetoric and we forget what got us here. What got us here? The issue at hand is, first, we have illegal immigrants crossing our southern border. That's a basic fact. And one of the reasons, well, first off, some are arrested, some are not. You have the unapprehended illegal immigrants, and then you have the ones that are arrested. Only the ones that are arrested, we know, are the ones we can account for. For example, we say last year there were 900,000 illegal immigrants crossing the border. Those are just the ones we've apprehended. Who knows how many crossed without being apprehended? So we have two groups crossing the border. Illegal immigrants who are apprehended and those who are not. To break that down, hence the term illegal, they're crossing the border without permission. But here's where the problem arises. Because of various loopholes in our immigration laws, the people who are crossing the border and that are apprehended, they're claiming illegitimate asylum claims. They're claiming asylum illegitimately. What do I mean by that? The term for asylum is very, well, it's overly broad in my opinion, how it's written right now, but it's meant to be very specific. Here's who should qualify for asylum under our current federal immigration laws. Those foreigners who suffer persecution, I'm reading directly from the government's website. Those who are eligible for asylum, or are even eligible to claim it, to have a hearing, are those from foreign countries that suffer persecution based on these reasons: their skin color, their religion, their nationality, their membership in a particular social group, or their political opinion. Basically, political persecution. That's it. That's 5 different areas that you have to suffer harm in order to even claim asylum, and that doesn't even mean you get asylum granted. You have asylum granted. You have to claim that you've been persecuted physically. I'm not talking about bullied on social media. I'm talking about physical harm to your family back in your home country based on your skin color, your religion, your nationality, your membership in a particular social group, and your political opinion. I would argue that's overly broad. But there you have it. What we're having people cross our border and claim asylum because they live in an impoverished country. Well, I hate to break it to you, but you don't qualify for asylum because you have to meet those specific requirements, and just because you come from a country that is undeveloped or that is impoverished, that doesn't mean you get a free pass into America. Now, I sympathize with these people, and I think America needs to continue to export our wealth, and I don't mean socialism. I mean we need to continue to export our free market ideas to these third world countries, these underdeveloped countries, so that they can develop and create wealth on their own. But as far as giving people a free pass into America just because they're poor, well, we have poor people in America. We got people on our streets in Chicago. I mean, look over at L.A. in California. Over 30,000 homeless people just in L.A. County. Why don't we take care of them first before we start letting people into our country illegally? I digress. My point in that, asylum is not meant for the millions each year, which is how many claims we get. It's meant for the select few who basically face political, physical persecution back in their home country. Our government apprehends the million or so illegal immigrants at the border each year. It fluctuates, 600,000. This year it's going to be over 1 million. Our government apprehends them. They then drive them to a processing center on a air-conditioned bus, and at the processing center, we get their name, assuming they're telling us the truth. We get their fingerprints, and any kind of other information our government can get. And then these illegal immigrants, especially if they have children, they are released soon thereafter. Some might stay in the detention facility for a couple weeks, but in large part, after 30 days or so, these illegal immigrants are released into the U.S. mainland. And they're assigned a court hearing, a court date for their fake asylum claim. And guess how many show up? 10% on a good day. 2 to 5% on a bad day. So you have 1 million illegal immigrants in the country. In a year, about 900 to 950,000 stay in the mainland, never to be seen again. We'll be back. Hamilton Corner, American Family Radio.
Big Brother is eavesdropping. I am Matt Staver with Freedom's Call. Apparently, taking away First Amendment rights is becoming all the rage, and the state of Maine just jumped on the unconstitutional bandwagon. Maine is now the 17th state to ban therapy for minors with unwanted same-sex attraction. This is a huge intrusion into personal freedom and privacy. Counseling sessions are confidential. The government is not invited into the session. Licensed therapists and their clients should be able to discuss whatever they choose. For people struggling with unwanted same-sex attraction, this is no small matter. Talk therapy can be the difference between life and death. Countless people have had their lives change for the better through these important counseling sessions. That's why Liberty Counsel is involved in several talk therapy legal cases right now. The fundamental rights of counselors and clients must be protected. Stay informed at Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org.
The loss of a child through abortion, miscarriage, or stillbirth affects the emotional health of families. Feelings of anger, sadness, and regret can be overwhelming. There is hope and healing in the aftermath of a reproductive loss. Call the International Helpline at 866-482-LIFE to talk with someone who has been where you are and healed to help others. Your call is confidential. 866-482-LIFE.
Doc, I've been feeling a little out of sorts lately. Can you help?
Well, let's try a few questions. What do you think of when I say the word Roku?
Oh, my wife and I used to love that dance when we were younger.
Yes, I'd say you're a little out of touch.
What do you recommend?
I recommend you listen to AFR.
American Family Radio. Available on Apple and Android products, Amazon Alexa, and now available on Roku.
And then we'd whip, and then we'd nay-nay. Oh, it was wonderful.
Ryan Fisher here with today's Life and Liberty Minute. A lot of angry, screechy voices in our culture insist we are facing a global warming emergency. Don't believe them. Nature dropped 2 feet of snow on Colorado on the first day of summer this year, and the snowpack in the Rockies is 40 times its normal size. The recent dump of snow was caused by, wait for it, an unusually cold pool of air at high altitudes over the western U.S. One ski resort will even be open on the 4th of July. So much for catastrophic global warming. Dr. Motataka Nakamura, a climate researcher with a doctorate from MIT, has just released a book which argues the theory of global warming is based on data which is untrustworthy, falsified, and has no scientific value. I say we stick with the climate scientist from MIT on this one.
Catch Brian Fisher on Focal Point, weekday afternoons at 1:05 Central on American Family Radio.
Shining light into the darkness, this is the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio. Walker Wildmon here, sitting in for Abraham Hamilton III. Glad to be with you this Wednesday afternoon. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, afr.net is the website. afr.net is the website. Jumping back into the issue of illegal immigration, I outlined in the first segment how we've gotten to this point. And basically, to sum all of this up, Abe has talked about this. I call him Abe. The audience calls him Abraham Hamilton III. But Abe has said this before, and that is, you know, the media likes to say that we have an estimated 10 million illegal immigrants in the country. We have an estimated 11 million illegal immigrants in the country. Well, first off, that study that they're citing is from 10 years ago. It's a 2010 survey, once again, a survey that claims that there, at that point in 2010, there were roughly 11 million illegal immigrants. Well, let's just assume, let's just give that study the benefit of the doubt. Well, guess what? We're not still at 10 million illegal immigrants. We're at like 20 million. Why? Because they're still flowing across the border. And so you can't keep citing a study from 10 years ago when the problem still exists. I mean, this is baffling. That's journalistic malpractice. 100% journalistic malpractice. You cite a study from 10 years ago and you provide no explanation. And some of the journalists don't even cite that the study's from 2010. They don't even cite that. They just say 11 million, 11 million. No, we're at 20 million minimum. 20 million minimum. I'll tell you why. Because we have 800,000 this year, over a million, coming across each year. And then what did I say before the break? 90 to 95% of them walk straight into the mainland. They might go to a detention facility for a couple days, maybe a month maximum. And then guess what? They get bussed into downtown El Paso, Texas, downtown San Antonio, downtown San Diego, wherever, and they just drop them off. They literally just open the bus door and say, get out. And they have a little sheet of paper that says, your court date is in 12 months. And guess where your court date is? Halfway across the country. So you think these criminals are going to show up at the court date? Absolutely not. And Jason, our producer, had a very good point during the break, and that is, when Americans miss our court date, guess what happens? The sheriff deputy comes straight to our door and he knocks. He knocks on our door and he says, Mr. Wildmon, you were summoned to court this morning and you didn't show up. Will you please come with me? Or they'll say, voluntarily drive down to the courthouse. Well, guess what happens if you come into our country illegally? Let's just say Mr. Wildmon comes into the country illegally. He gets dropped off in downtown El Paso after crossing the border illegally, and he's told, see you in 12 months, Mr. Wildmon. And the feds have no address on him, no driver's license, no phone number, nothing, no way to contact him. And guess what Mr. Wildmon crossing the border illegally does? He doesn't show up at the court date. And from a criminal standpoint, if I were a criminal, I wouldn't show up either. So you can understand why the criminals don't show up at the court date. Why? Because nobody really tracks them down. And to go back to where we started, that's how we're at a minimum of 20 million illegal immigrants. Could be 25 or 30. Or, who knows, it could be even more than that. I might even be wrong. I may be like the media. I may be underestimating it. My conclusion in all of this, for now, is that Washington, D.C. has refused to act. Politicians in Washington, D.C. have refused to fix the loopholes and the problems with our system. They've refused to build a physical barrier on the border. Thus, you have this flow, this influx at the southern border. Some on the left, some from CNN, want to blame President Trump. We're going to play clip 3 here. This is clip 3. A fellow by the name of CNN political analyst by the name of John Avlon. He wants to blame the Trump administration for this problem on the southern border. Clip 3, let's listen.
I think that's why Nancy Pelosi is really focusing on the need, she argues, to pass this bill, because blame could credibly be shifted, at least in the firefights of politics, to Democrats saying, why aren't you funding the money to make the situation better? Liberal Democrats saying, look, we don't want to have any association with this unless, kids get out of cages. Bottom line in politics, perfect can't be made the enemy of the good. This is a humanitarian crisis on the border, but it's largely self-inflicted. It'll be a stain on America's reputation. Funding it Funding is a degree of relief for these folks is probably better than compounding the crisis and politically catching some flack for what's fundamentally a Trump administration policy.
There you have it. I wanted you to listen to the last part of that, and that is when this CNN analyst, Mr. Smart Guy, says that this is fundamentally a Trump administration policy. That is the crisis. The crisis has been, what he's saying is that this crisis has been intentionally brought upon the American people by the Trump administration. And then, halfway through the clip, he throws in the whole, kids in cages talking point. And that's a farce. That's a falsehood. That's a lie. There's not kids in cages. There's kids in detention centers. Why? Because the adults, and I'm not even going to say their family, because 85% of them aren't even legitimate families. They're kidnapped. Literally, they're pawned out. The kids are pawned out. That's another thing the media is not going to tell you. This whole idea that we've got these families, mommy and daddy, and all the 3 kids are just swimming across the Rio Grande and looking for a better life. That happens. It happens. That scenario happens, but very, very rarely. I tell you what's happening is MS-13 and all the gangs, what are they doing? They're buying kids. They're trafficking kids. Why? Because if they swim across the Rio Grande with a child, then guess what? The courts have said minimum of 30 days you can be held in a detention facility. So guess what happens? MS-13 swims across the Rio Grande with a child. They go to the detention facility. Oh, this is my son. This is my daughter. Yeah, we're a family. This is my daughter. No, it's not your daughter. You kidnapped the child. And then guess what happens? The MS-13 member gets out of jail in 30 days, goes and joins his gang down the street. And guess what happens to the kid? They get put in the foster care system. They get put in the foster care system, never to see their legitimate parents again. And if you think that this is a rarity and I'm exaggerating and using hyperbole, no, I'm not. This stuff actually happens. And the situations I'm talking about is actually the vast majority of what's happening down there. The percentage of legitimate families, biological mom, dad, children crossing the border illegally is very, very, very rare. But how does the federal officials confirm that? They can't. They don't have IDs. They don't have a database. They don't even know who these people are. But after further investigation, the federal government has concluded that the vast majority of these so-called family units are actually human trafficking units. And CNN political analyst says, oh, this is a Trump administration problem. I would agree with him that this is self-inflicted. I would say it's self-inflicted by our federal government. Why? Because the Democrats and Republicans in Washington, D.C. fail to secure the border. I want to play clip 2 here. This is the New York Times' Maggie Haberman on CNN. And guess what she's doing? Oh, she's blaming Trump. Clip 2. Let's listen.
And I think that it is important to bear in mind that what took place, as we understand it, with this case, and the picture is horrific, is this was a family that was part of the metering system that the administration is doing in terms of asylum claims, which is trying to deter legal immigration. We talk a lot about illegal immigration over that border. This is the legal asylum system, which the White House is trying to push back on and slow down in terms of claims that people are seeking. This family apparently got frustrated, and the father...
They had a 2-month wait, I guess, on the other side?
At least, and the thing with these metering claims is they're not guaranteed a date. They're not necessarily guaranteed when they're going to have any kind of access or meeting or anything. And so it's not as if they were waiting a day. They were waiting, as you say, for a while. It was blisteringly hot. They grew frantic, it sounds like, and tried to, get across another way. I do think you're going to hear the president say that essentially this is not his fault, that there has been warning to other people not to do this. He is very triggered by images, right. And I think that other people will be very triggered by what is an awful, awful, awful picture. So it's possible he will have a different response, but I think what you just described is certainly what his immediate response would be.
He gets the power.
Well, I want to cut it off there. That's Maggie Haberman from the New York Times on CNN, and the context there, which I failed to set up, my bad, the context there is that there's this horrific story about a child and a daughter and a dad who from all that I can see, it appears to be a legitimate family unit, which I said is a rarity. But this man and daughter, man and girl, let me just say that because I don't know. Who knows if it's her dad or not? We don't know. This male and young girl were trying to swim across the Rio Grande, and they both drowned, which is horrible. They both drowned, and what brought this story about is a picture. There's a picture online, you can see it, of the two deceased laying on the side of the river on the Mexican side. And this is a tragedy. It's unacceptable. And I'm 100% on board with everybody who says this stuff should not be happening. But for CNN to allow Maggie Haberman with the left-wing New York Times to basically blame this on Trump, how did she blame it on Trump, you ask? Because here's her words, talking about the people who died. They were waiting a while. It was blistering hot. They grew frantic. And it sounds like they tried to get across another way. How does she implicate President Trump? They were waiting a while. Basically, they filed for asylum on the Mexican side of the border, and they were having to wait their turn to get in America, and they grew impatient. Why? Because the Trump administration is taking too long. That's what Maggie Haberman's trying to say. So Maggie Haberman, New York Times, trying to blame President Trump for this horrific incident on the southern border. And you know what President Trump said, and he's right. When you have open borders policies, people drowned in the river. People drowned in the Rio Grande when you have open borders policies. Why? Because the Rio Grande is not meant to be a route for immigration. No, you're supposed to apply for legal immigration, wait your turn, and then you go through a port of entry like everybody else, and you get welcomed into America. But instead, this male decided to drag this girl along with him across the Rio Grande, and it's a tragedy, to say the least. A tragedy, to say the least. I want to move on to the debates tonight. You know, I mentioned that the Democrats are going to be debating, and by the way, we're going to take calls in the next segment. I'm going to go ahead and give out the number. 888 to call in to the show, the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio, to call in, share your thoughts, ask any kind of questions you have on the topics discussed today. 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840 is the number to call in. The debates tonight with the Democrats, the Democrat primary debates for president in 2020 start tonight. And some of the Republicans, some of the smart Republicans, have been saying that, you know, President Trump just needs to let them do their thing, talking about the Democrats. He doesn't need to comment on this. And, you know, President Trump has said, I'm going to live tweet these debates. You know, the debates are going to go on. I'm going to tweet out my thoughts as the debates are live and in progress. Well, some of these Republican strategists are saying, you know, President Trump just needs to cool it. He just needs to sit back. And I'll read directly from the news story here. This is from USA Today. But these Republican strategists say, here's the quote from GOP consultant Matt Makawiak. He said, the president, this is a quote, the president should let his campaign and the RNC handle real-time responses to the debate, end quote. He goes on to say, the president has very little influence on Democratic primary voters. When he attacks a candidate like Joe Biden, it forces Democrats to rally around his target, end quote. Basically telling President Trump to put his phone down, put his Twitter down. And, you know, there are times where I would agree President Trump needs to put the phone down on Twitter. He needs to stop tweeting out about his military plans, about his rounding up of illegal immigrants and deporting them, broadcasting the plans of our federal government, our law enforcement agencies, 2 weeks in advance. Talk about tipping the criminals off. Let's tell them we're all coming to round them up next week. Then they're going to, what are they going to do? They're going to flee. And that's exactly what's happening. I don't know why he did that, other than the fact that I thought he may be trying to scoop a leak in his own administration, a leak that he was planning those Immigration and Customs Enforcement raids this past Sunday, which he delayed, which was a horrible idea, trying to pander to Nancy Pelosi. You know, President Trump said, I'm gonna delay the ICE raids. I'm gonna give the Democrats 2 weeks to fix the immigration crisis. They've had 40 years to fix it. They've had 40 years to fix the immigration problem on our southern border, and they've done diddly squat. And you think Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are all of a sudden going to go, you know what? We're going to fix this. We're going to come together and we're going to fix it. No, they're not going to fix it. They could care less. They're political hacks who care nothing about the actual humans involved with this horrific situation at our southern border. Why do the Democrats not want to fix the problem? Because they want Hispanic votes when they can give amnesty. That's what this is all about. This is not about policy. This is about the Democrats getting voters at the ballot box when they can give unilateral, across-the-board amnesty to illegal immigrants. Hamilton Corner, we'll be back in a few minutes.
A call to action from American Family Radio.
There's all kind of difficulty in the world. But as the Word of God says, if your brother's in need and you have it within your ability to respond to their need, how can you claim to have love if you allow them to go without? What greater need is there than the need to live? I know life is rough, but it don't have nothing to do with the baby. Don't kill the baby. Don't wait for preborn campaigns. Don't wait for legislation to be passed in your state legislature. Don't wait till Roe versus Wade is overturned. Respond now. I believe with everything in me that we can end this scourge regardless of what they do in the halls of Congress and the halls of the state legislature. Every single family, every single church, go to the local abortion clinics. Let them know that you have people in your churches, people in your family that are willing to take the babies home. They have families that have been dying to take a child home. Don't kill the babies.
Visit afr.net.
What triggers God's judgment? This is David Wheaton, host of The Christian Worldview. Today, God is mainly portrayed as a God of love, compassion, and forgiveness. This is true, but it's not the full truth. The actual God of the Bible is also one whose judgment falls on those who willfully and unrepentantly disobey him. Consider the global flood God caused to destroy all breathing life, or how the Jews, God's chosen people, were punished, killed, or exiled for rebellion, or the great white throne judgment where God will throw those who have rejected him into the lake of fire. Yes, God is love, but he's also the just judge who is to be feared and obeyed. Hear more at thechristianworldview.org, and then join us this weekend for another topic that will sharpen your worldview.
Listen to The Christian Worldview with David Wheaton, Saturday mornings at 8 Central on American Family Radio.
Fox News commentary with Todd Starnes.
A lesson in civility, that story coming up. A pretty terrible thing happened to Eric Trump, the president's son. He was at a high-end Chicago bar socializing with friends when a staffer got in his face, muttered something anti-Trump, and then spit on the guy. She spit on Eric Trump. Secret Service apprehended the woman, but Mr. Trump did not press charges. Reminds me of the words of Congresswoman Maxine Waters. She told people to hunt down Trump staffers, even if they're at a restaurant or a gas station or a bar. Absolutely harass them. That's what she said. A while back, I got into a bit of a rowdy dow with the mayor of Memphis. He said some pretty unkind things about me. A few months later, we literally ran into each other at a football game. But instead of causing a scene, we both shook hands and exchanged kind words. It's called civility, and we could sure use a heaping helping dose of that in American culture these days. I'm Todd Starnes.
That's your Fox News commentary.
The Hamilton Corner podcast and 1-minute commentaries are available at afr.net. Back to the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio.
Welcome back to the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio. As the announcer just said, afr.net's the website. That's where you can find out all the information you need to know about the show. Walker Wildmon here, sitting in for Abraham Hamilton III. The Hamilton Corner is the name of the show. 888-589-8840 is the number to call in to the show. 888-589-8840. 589-8840 is the number to call in to the show. One last story I want to mention before I take calls. That is Robert Mueller, the leader of the Russian witch hunt, the leader of the fishing expedition, the hoax, will testify before Congress July 17th, just in a couple weeks here, July 17th. And, you know, some have talked about this entire Russia hoax boomeranging, or beginning to boomerang on the Democrats, and I believe that we're seeing that. And I think this entire thing is going to blow up in the Democrats' face. Why do you say that, Walker? Because guess what I think is going to happen between now and July 17th? I think that Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General for the Department of Justice, is going to release his investigative findings of the corrupt origins of this entire investigation. I think he's going to release that report when? Between now and July 17th, which is going to be embarrassing for Robert Mueller to testify publicly before Congress when Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General, is about to release a blistering report about the criminal origins, yes, I said it, the criminal origins of this entire investigation into President Trump. And I don't know why the Democrats are doing this to themselves, inviting Robert Mueller to testify publicly when this report is about to drop that's about to embarrass Robert Mueller and all the fishermen that joined the Russia fishing expedition into no crime. That's going to be something funny to watch. And once again, as I've always said, these hearings are a big waste of time. They have no teeth to them. And this is no different. Democrats are about to waste our tax dollars. America's going to pay for this fake, phony hearing where Robert Mueller is going to continue to spill anti-Trump stuff, and all of it's going to happen on taxpayer dime. I want to go to Rick in Arkansas. Rick, welcome to the Hamilton Corner.
Thank you, Walker. I just wanted to mention about the kids that are crossing the border. A lot of those children end up, or I'm going to say, even if it's a small percentage, children end up in the sex trade here in the United States. And they're actually renting kids to bring over so that they can have a child with them so they can enter into the country. And some of those kids get sent back. Some of them get sold into the sex trade. I think that is a blemish on our country. It's a blemish on our government for not making that well known, and should be very ashamed of any slavery trade, let alone the sex trade that's going on in our country.
Yeah. No, you're exactly right, Rick, and I appreciate you calling in. Rick's right, you know, that there's stories out there, and this is validated, that some of these children are being rented. They're renting children to take them across the border. Why? Because you get a little bit more leniency if you cross the border with a child. That's what's going on. And the Democrats would love, they're continually trying to scratch at the wounds of America and bring up slavery and reparations and all this. Well, how about we talk about modern slavery? And that is these children being trafficked across our southern border. How about we fix that problem? Rebecca in Louisiana. Rebecca, welcome to the Hamilton Corner.
Thank you, Walker. You do a yeoman's job. I want to trace it a little bit. I mean, when we look at the education system, we look at Google controlling the information and all the people who disseminate untruths. And then we look at the swamp people up there, which include a lot of the Republicans. Mm-hmm. And it's a shameful thing. We, obviously, we have to pray. And we can just hope that in spite of the fact that they don't care about the children, they'll use them, they'll use us. Mm-hmm. Every other year they shift power and play games and say, look here and look there, while they accrue power and bigger government. Mm-hmm. But I thank you, Walker.
Thank you. Thank you, Rebecca. Very good points there. Rebecca's onto this game. She's onto this game that's going on in our country. What game am I talking about? I'm talking about the game between Republicans and Democrats. And the Republicans had power 2 years ago. They had power for 2 years, from 2016 to 2018, from January to January. From January 2016 to January 2018, they had power in both houses of Congress and the White House. What did they do with that power? Nothing. So this is not just a Democrat issue. Democrats are not only to blame for this. This is a Republican/Democrat problem in Washington, D.C. And you might could say, well, they just couldn't agree on stuff. And I would agree. They couldn't agree on anything. And that's the problem. Because there were 53 or 54 Republican senators in the Senate, and then Republicans had the majority in the House easily. And guess what? There were 3 or 4 Republican senators who just couldn't dream of securing our border. And what happened? That stopped the entire legislative process from happening. And guess what got accomplished? Nothing. Yeah, the tax cuts got put in place, but they've been promising that for 30 years, since Reagan. Reagan actually followed through with it, but the Republicans have been promising tax cuts for 30 years, and they finally delivered on it, and that's great. Good for them. Proud of them, but tax cuts is not the only problem that our country is facing. Jay in Arkansas. We'll go to Jay in Arkansas. Jay, welcome to the Hamilton Corner.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Wildmon. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. How frustrating! How this really highlights the frustration of when the Republicans controlled all 3 branches, and under the leadership of Paul Ryan, and them did nothing to secure the border when they could have done it so easily. And you know, in this humanitarian crisis, it seems so obvious to me that if the wall was there, an impenetrable wall, then nobody would try to come. There wouldn't be hardly anybody showing up to try to cross it, and therefore there'd be no humanitarian crisis. Mm-hmm. And it looks to me like the only way we'll ever get Pelosi and Schumer to agree to fund the walls if we have a caravan of persecuted devout Christians coming, and they'll throw a wall in about 15 minutes, I think.
You know, that's a good point, Jay, because they love to bash Christians and conservatives. You put a group of conservatives coming up to the border, Democrats will build a wall. Very good point, Jay. Thanks for calling in to the show. I'll go to Corey in Texas, and the number to call in is 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. I'll go to Corey in the state of Texas. Corey, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, you doing well?
Hey, real quick. All right, look, everybody's talking about the border crisis. People don't realize Mexico is the reason for the border crisis in the first place.
Correct.
They're the ones that established the border with the United States and asked the United States to have the Border Patrol set up during World War II, because a lot of the Hispanics down there were fighting in the U.S. Army helping us out in World War II. It's sad what happened, and before they issue out the $4.6 billion, they need to be worried about taking care of internal issues here first, like paying for reparations of slavery. I mean, slavery's wrong, you know, from what's going on now with them bringing over people, but we need to handle issues here first. And charity starts at home, and then you take it abroad. I mean, every time the issue of reparations comes up for African Americans or anything, it always gets swept under the rug, and that's wrong.
Hey, Corey, let me ask you one question. I agree with you that move on. Okay, sorry about that. I think we lost Corey there. David, I'm going to go to David in Mississippi. David, welcome to the show. Hey, David, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hey, welcome to the Hamilton Corner. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I had an idea there, and I'm wondering why we just don't go ahead and get Mexico to, bring in Mexico. It's about 5 different states and all the way down to the Panama Canal, and then we can just have this small little border there at the Panama Canal to protect.
Yeah. Well, David, just to be honest with you, I don't want Central America. I don't even want Mexico. Why? because they're full of drug cartels, gangs, violence, poverty.
Right. But you got to realize that, if we bring them into the United States, right, so
yeah,
we would be able to police those things and
sure,
bring in, federal agencies and whatnot, collect taxes.
Yeah.
And all these low-wage countries that are taking American jobs be forced to pay minimum wage, and I don't know. I think it'd be a good idea.
All right, thanks, David, for calling in. And I think David's got a little tongue-in-cheek there, being a little sarcastic, and I don't blame him. We can all be a little cynical here. But, the idea that we take in Mexico, absolutely not. I wouldn't. You pay me $1 trillion, I wouldn't take Mexico. I mean, it's a bad place. Let me just say that. Now, they've got some nice places like Cancun, some resort areas, but we do not want Mexico. And you think the Democrats are going to let us build a wall south of Mexico by Guatemala? Absolutely not, they won't. Because if we take in Mexico, guess what the Democrats will say? We need to take in more. We just need to take in the whole South American continent. But appreciate the call, David. I don't want to take in Mexico and deal with their mess. We have enough problems of our own. We need to secure our southern border and do it fast. I want to go back to what a caller said a few minutes ago. I think we lost audio or something, so we had to let him go. But he was saying that we need to focus on our own problems in America, and I would agree with that 1,000%. We need to fix the problems in our country. But then he said we need to pay reparations to African Americans, and I think that is a bad idea. First, you can't do it. You can't do it because tell me who's alive now. Did your neighbor own slaves? Was your neighbor a slave? No, they weren't. Nobody's alive that committed the sin or was victim to that whole process, to that stain on America. That's just a bone. Talk about a dog whistle. The Democrats go, President Trump's dog whistling to the KKK. President Trump's dog whistling to the white nationalist. President Trump sending out a dog whistle to the haters and the bigots. You know who's sending out a dog whistle? The Democrats. The Democrats are throwing out a bone to the black community. Why? Because many in the black community are waking up to this fact that Democrats don't even care about the black community. They just want their vote. So they're throwing out this reparations talking point, and they're all latching onto it. You know who the blacks need to start voting for? People who promote free market policies that bring them out of poverty and get them jobs where they can build their own family and do their own thing and be free from the government, free from the welfare system. That's where liberty and freedom is, and that's what conservatives have been pushing for years. But the Democrats want to keep our country divided. Why? Because they divide and conquer. The Democrats divide and conquer. They thrive off of that. Look, just listen to the Democrats. Listen to the Democrats. They hardly ever talk about unity, bringing people together. No, they always talk about how to divide our country, what's wrong with America. America's so bad. Well, you know what I say? If America's so bad, then why don't you go somewhere else? One more call we'll take today. Kathy in Ohio. Kathy, welcome to the Hamilton Corner.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Kathy. What's on your mind?
Well, I have been hearing how Democrats are broke and the Republicans couldn't get things done. It seems to me that Washington is broke. And there is a grassroots movement right now called the Convention of States that we have the power under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution to change the Constitution. This grassroots movement has several things on its platform. One of them is to reduce the power of the federal government. Two is to force them to balance a budget.
Yeah.
And then there's other things that are on this platform. But what I wanted to share with listeners
15
is that
seconds.
if they would just go to conventionofstates.com, sign a petition to get their state.
All right. Thanks, Kathy, for calling in. We got to go. You've been listening to the Hamilton Corner on American Family Radio. Maybe another day we'll talk about the Convention of States. Stay tuned to American Family Radio, AFR.net is the website.
The view